Previously on Pax Americana. Terra Nova slated to reach 5 million population by the end of next year, with colonists booking their transport across the planet, looking for a better life even in Arctic conditions of minus 75 degrees. Colonists continue to protest against militarization of the colonies and increasing federal control over the planet by the military. The Senate Appropriations Committee has greenlit funding for the CVX-2000 project and the associated FX Strike Fighter program. Both are slated to enter service in some time after the year 2000. Next up on Pax Americana. Breaking news. The U.T.S. Rubicon was destroyed earlier this week by what the Exploration Corps is reporting as a serious incident. The initial reports indicate no survivors, and the government has moved to dispatch a recovery force to bring the bodies of the lost crew members home. It is unclear what destroyed the ship, and with all 84 crew members on board, a thorough investigation is expected to be conducted. This comes as more alien vessels have appeared and begun probing at outer colonies. The Navy has swiftly destroyed these vessels, but worry still abounds. With public support as an all-time high in the core world for increasing military expenditure to ensure the safety of the nation, in light of the recent attacks, the President has signed a bill into a law appropriating funds for 5 new carriers, including 3 60,000-ton carriers, yet developed, as well as dozens of new destroyers and frigates. The military is expected to see the highest budget since its founding. Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the next episode of Aurora 4X Pax Americana. We're back and we're here with the next episode number 5 of the series. Now, to start with, what we're going to be talking about this episode, what we're primarily going to be focusing on is the changes in our fleet composition going from the late 1980s fleet to the early 2000s fleet and what we're building towards. As you can see here, we've ordered up the first of the Akan class CVL carriers. We've also ordered up its associated fleet group that will be able to protect it. We're going to have a certain amount of these new Akan classes, and then we're going to switch over to the fleet carriers. So if, to give you an idea, we're going to, well, I'm going to show on screen the kind of fleet numbers we're going to be changing and we're going to be looking at, okay? So we're going to go from about 5, which we currently have in service. We have 5 carriers in service of the light class, so that is 5 light carriers at 20,000 tons. We're going to go from that to 7 light carriers, so that'll include the new Akan class. So we're going to build 2 new Akan classes, and then we're going to build 2 or 3 new fleet carriers that will be the primary fleet carriers for everything that we need. We're also going to build 8 of the CGX cruisers, and we're going to up our destroyer count from its current 18 to around 36 destroyers. Maybe 32, no, 30 destroyers, I think it's what we're actually going to go for. And then for frigates, we're going to go from around 16 to 36. And for corvettes, we're going to go from 25 to 40. And for support vessels, we're going to need to up that to 5. Now, what we've been doing on screen, as you may be able to see, is we've been kind of sorting out some of our logistics. I'm beginning to set up our ordnance correctly. I'm also moving over maintenance facilities to some of the outlying colonies to get them supplied and get them ready for being part of the, well, supply chain to be able to support naval infrastructure and naval capability in those areas. We also had an issue actually with the Red Sea. Its jump drive failed and it didn't catch that on the overall back. So that is going to mean that I have to dispatch a exploration ship to immediately go and assist that vessel, bring it home, because it'll be able to use the other ship's jump drive and piggyback off that to get back to a port where it can begin to refuel and resupply. So with those massive fleet numbers that I talked about, and see that we're going to be building up to, we're going to be building up to having a fleet over 1 million tons of military shipping. This is going to be an extremely heavy strain on both the treasury, the resources that we have available, as well as the infrastructure maintenance needed. And so you may be asking, how are we going to afford to pay for that? Well, we're going to afford to pay for it in a few different ways. Number one, we're going to continue to exploit our outlying colonies. We're going to increase our fuel production, which we're going to need to, considering the amount of new ships that will be patrolling and doing new things. They will need a lot of fuel to stay afloat. And then third, we're going to ramp up ordnance production, because the biggest thing as well is if we have 10 carriers, that's over nearly 300 fighters. That is 1,200 missiles alone on the fighters, and we're not counting the destroyers or any of the other ships which are going to have new missiles, right? And as we can see here, actually, Quarion has attacked the Rubicon here in one of the Quarion Assault's mission. I knew this was a possibility, and unfortunately, the Rubicon is the first U.T.S. ship lost in line of service. With this loss, a lot's going to change. We're going to recall all exploration ships immediately back to Earth. We dispatch carrier group under the Galactica carrier group under with support vessels to the area to find the ship and hopefully rescue the survivors. Unfortunately, this would end up being too late, and all survivors would be lost in the explosion. The government, of course, wanting a response on what the hell happened and how can we not have this happen, considering these are people just dying in space. The first ever spaceship to explode and have people die in space away from Earth. The bodies are going to be recovered, obviously. With that now, in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to arm our exploration ships, and we'll get to that in a little bit. We're going to make a Block 2 that will have them armed to be able to defend against this, but in that time, before we have that available, we are going to send every ship back to port in case this can happen, because this could happen to any. We also need to figure out how we're going to defeat this threat, and the way we're going to defeat this threat is more sensors, more capability, more patrols, larger fleet. All these things will significantly help. Sadly, though, that ship will have been lost, and there's not a lot that we can unfortunately do about that. And the ship and the enemy ship just vanished, of course. But with all the exploration ships back, that does mean that we're going to be cancelling exploration for quite a bit of time. That is going to be a big setback in a lot of ways. As we can see here, the U.T.S. Rubicon sadly went down with all 86 of its crew dead, including the commander of the ship. And with them gone, we look forward. With only 7 exploration ships left, we will have the Block 2 hopefully ready to go eventually. We need to get support jumpers as well, support groups into the area to actually be able to support the fleet. As you may imagine, it's quite difficult to support a carrier strike group away from shore, about 10 billion kilometers away from port. And so we need to use jump tenders and support vessels and all this other stuff, and it does create quite some problems. It's the first ever use of a carrier group beyond Sol, and the Galactica is ready to meet the task with the ship. And yeah, so this again really raises the fact that we need a lot more ships than we currently do, and you may be asking yourself again, why build so many ships? We have so much in port that we're not using, and the question is twofold. It's one, it gives us the ability to have patrols constantly. I want to have frigate patrols everywhere, looking for things, ensuring that areas are safe. I want to have people on duty rotation at checkpoint stations. I want corvettes protecting planets from potential enemy forces. And all of that is going to require a lot of ships. So we begin to expand outwards and outwards and outwards as the necessity arises to build the ships, right? And build our industry. It's kind of an egg or the chicken, right? We need to build ships to defend our income, but does the income come first for the ships, or the ships come first before for the income? And in this sense, the ships are going to come first before the income. So as we expand, we predictably are going to expand really far outwards. We're going to need that. As you can see here, we take no precautions, or we take precautions. We send in our electronic warfare fighter, not electronic warfare, our early warning craft, and that determines that there is no alien ship above the wreck, and we order the Galactica to head back. We pick up the life pods, but we pick up the coffins, now the coffins they are, and we send them home for burial on Earth. Sadly, they are, of course, all dead, and I think quite a few, we might not have bodies for quite a few of them as well, because they got hit by railguns and the reactor exploded, I think, so many of the bodies would have been blown to pieces. So we're getting everything back to Seoul, and again, we've got to be a lot more cautious in what we're dealing with. And I would imagine, a nation in its early phases of exploration, this kind of loss would be a big deal. It would be a big part of the news, a big part of government spending and policy, and there would be answers wanted about what we're going to do, how we're going to improve that, and that's why the military is going to take quite a bit of flack for it, and perhaps that's even how all of those ships are going to be afforded for, is that the people, well, apparently our ships aren't safe, and we need more military vessels to ensure their safety. So maybe that pushed policymakers to fund everything that was needed. So again, just sorting up the Ruby, getting all those other ships moved around, and I'm also going to create a new jump tender. This is going to mount on it a 60,000 ton capacity military jump drive. This is for our fleet. This is for our fleet carrier, which is 60,000 tons. We're going to need a very big jump drive for that kind of carrier, and it's an extremely expensive drive. It's a a very, very expensive thing, jump drives. Both to research and also just cost overall, right? We're also only about 3 years off of our ion drive technology, which is going to be a really big deal. Of course, I'm looking for entering the first fleet carrier into service by the year 2000. The biggest lead item on that, or the biggest issue on that to get to that point, is going to be the shipyard. We need to expand the shipyard up to 65,000 tons or 60,000 tons, and that is not a cheap or quick process. And it's going to require a lot of workers to make work for us. And again, we are continuing to ship stuff over. I believe we start shipping over mines to New Eden now. So we're going to get the first manned mining going on New Eden, which is going to be necessary. Because what I want to do again is build maintenance supplies on the planet, or build infrastructure on the planet to really get it expanding. And so once we get that population up to maybe 10 million people, we're going to consider sending over construction factories to start its own construction efforts. And there we go. The Pacific Ocean got back to port, which is fantastic news. And so we're looking all good to go. Populations have grown pretty extensively, and especially on Terra Nova, populations have grown pretty substantially as well. ECX 10 there. So I come up with the new exploration class vessel here, which is going to be the Block 2. I initially thought, okay, we're going to make a completely new class of ship, but I'm like, that's going to be too expensive. We have so many ships in service. Let's just get Block 2 going. It'll work for the meantime, and we'll work on the ECX later. And so what we do is we take out all of the buoy systems, and we replace them with missile systems. So we're going to provide the ship with 16 S8 launch cells, which are going to carry 16 S8 or SIM-8 missiles, and these missiles will ensure safety, right? So the biggest threat to these vessels is that single ship, right, that comes in and attacks, and it just appears. It scouts, it appears, it attacks. If we have 16 missiles on the ship, we can fire them at the enemy target. And generally speaking, 16 size 8 missiles should be enough to destroy the enemy vessel, right? Maybe it won't be. I might need to revisit that kind of capability, but at the very least, it's going to be enough to do significant damage. We also are starting construction of some of our newer stations, which are coming online. A lot of them are going to be very, very important for, again, defending against those raiders. And again, we're going to move over support group 1, which was the supply vessel actually supporting everything we needed as we look towards 1989. Now, we are still going to expand in the direction of 109 Aquarii. We're not shutting that down. There are very valuable planets that are quite close to colonization and to habitability. And so that is not going to be ignored by the colonization plans. 2 Aberdeen-class vessels finished. These freighters are very valuable. In fact, you're going to need a lot more freighters, specifically to move minerals and move other resources around. So we might consider actually building larger ships for this. That's just something that I've been thinking about. And as you can see here, we're stabilizing that jump point, get it sorted out, and that will allow us to begin moving the first colonists over to one another quarry. We are going to need some naming for that. And we also get our FDBs and our PMBs. So these are the maintenance bases, and these are the fighter defense bases. And what they will do is they're going to work in 2 capacities. The fighter defense bases can be put above planets for local defense, and then they can also be paired with the maintenance base to provide checkpoint duty, right? So what I want is that near each jump point coming in and out of the system, or on the way between the jump points coming in and out of the system, I want a checkpoint that will have fighters and will have detection sensors that will inform us of any ships coming in or out, and will also be able to respond and destroy those ships if they do pose to be a threat. Furthermore, these checkpoints can also be used for refueling and resupply by local patrols, and these local patrols can really get everything they need. We're also moving over a lot of deep space tracking stations to some of the outer colonies. Again, we need to be able to see the targets before they come in. That's what's really helped with response to other forces that, other ships of the same class that have come in. And we're now entering again January of 1990. We also complete research into the Planetary Defense Command HQ, and we'll get to that in a bit. I don't see it, I think, here immediately. However, I do believe something else happens. I think there's an enemy ship. No, there isn't. No, we're just looking at Box Inventory. Which is, of course, the place that holds Terra Nova. Oh, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm looking for where we're going to put our checkpoint first, or the first checkpoint, because the base limiting factor is we only have... Our fighter production is actually pretty slow. That's something that we do need to actually increase is the fighter production, and so we make checkpoint A1, and that's going to be for Sol. So it'll be known as Sol A1 checkpoint. We have some issues with it, and we have to kind of make some other stuff to make it work out. However, it's very, very important that it works how needed. And so we're going to get, I think, 22 fighters total of the ship. But first, we're going to tug over the planetary maintenance base, and that will, or the maintenance base. And then that will be able to support those fighters in the hangars. They can actually support them in the hangars, which is really, really cool if you use it in the deep space population. Which is basically just a colony in deep space, which can work pretty damn well. We have load from ordnance here, Earth, and we are going to be setting up the fighter wings for the FAAs. Speaking of the FAA, we are going to be probably replacing it in service relatively soon. As again, the next thing that we need is the ion drive technology and also the additional power boost. I'm hoping by about 1998, 1996, we've replaced the majority of the fighters with the new, not replaced, but we've started to build the new F variant, the new fighter variants of that are more capable, right? We're probably going to still have many FAAs still in service because there's a lot of them around, and we can't replace all the new ships at once. And so they are probably going to remain in service into the 2000s. We will attempt to replace them. And speaking of, we've got an enemy ship here coming in. Now, I'm not going to go into live commentary for this one because it's a really simple one. We basically just sortie the frigate out and we activate its ordnance and we fire everything at the bloody thing and it explodes. So what these are and what military intelligence, aka myself, have come up with of what the hell are these aliens doing and why are they doing this. These are probing attacks, and these probing attacks are looking for weaknesses and vulnerabilities within our defense network to then send in a potentially larger fleet that could do serious damage. And with that in mind, we need to build up our fleet, we need to build up our defenses, and we need to be ready for that. So we have the Jutland fire off its ammunition. It's not enough, so I order the Alamein to fire its own ammunition at the target, Alamein. And it hits one of the reactors, and it explodes, killing the ship and securing ourselves a good kill. However, unfortunately, due to the primitiveness of Nova Prime's military infrastructure, we don't yet have ordnance transfer capability or refuel capability. So that means that the ships are going to have to head back elsewhere, and I'm going to have to send reinforcements to Terra Nova Prime to ensure that if there is another ship that appears, we'll be able to defend it. And I'm even considering the potentiality of sending a carrier group to Terra Nova Prime due to the significant importance of the colony. If we can get the maintenance capability enough, we can do that. A carrier group is around 120,000 tons in terms of actual support capacity needed. Carrier, well, not 100,000 tons, it's 20,000, 50,000, and yeah, it's about 70,000 tons, 70,000, 70,000, 80,000 tons. You'll be able to support a carrier group. And we are pretty close to that on Terra Nova. However, that is going to still require a lot more transport before we can really go ahead with that. Again, this is also a marketing for we need more fighter bases at these areas, and we don't have enough fighters, so I built another 22 of them, of the FAAs. Again, the FAA is going to stay in service probably for a long time, and I may even consider building an F8B to change. Unfortunately, refitting fighters is difficult. It's not really possible. You can do it. However, you require a shipyard. So that's something that we may do, just because I like the theme, but it's not really efficient, or not really something that's hugely possible, like in the same way that it is for ships. We also designed our first Gaia-class terraformer. So this is the new terraforming modules, and we're going to be building these. They're very expensive. When we're building these, I'm going to be sending them over to Terra Nova Prime. The reason we're building them and not installations, which we have on Mars, is that the modules do not require people on the ground to work them. While a terraforming installation may require 250,000 people to work, or whatever, a module just requires the crew. So it's actually really cheap in that regard. And when we have frontier colonies that can't really support a large terraforming industry on the planet, it's the best way to terraform. And that terraform is going to be really, really important for a lot of these worlds that are so close to habitability that if we would just slightly adjust the lever on the temperature and warm it up a little bit, like it's like it's an oven or whatever, we would get a very habitable place to live. And as we can see here, we've got our station set up here on the jump point. And again, these guys will be able to tell us if anything's coming through or out, and these FAA fighters, if anything does come through, that is 88 missiles ready to be deployed right into their face to destroy them. But most importantly, they're guarding an area where if an alien ship appears transiting through the sole jump point, or not transiting through, transiting through maybe, but also appearing near the sole jump point or appearing near the shipping lane, those fighters can immediately be dispatched to provide assistance. Corvette Squadron 1 has completed orders, and that is the new Corvette Squadron we sent over to Terra Nova Prime to ensure that it is surviving, it's doing okay. And I also realized that Nelson military base now has a population where we can start setting it up to actually support a formation of forces to defend our gas giant fuel harvesting operations. And so that's exactly what we do. We have our maintenance facilities sent over, and Horatio military base abides. We send Horatio stuff over as well. And yeah, here we go. So we're setting up those maintenance facilities now over on Nelson military base. And that will probably support some frigates. It might support some corvettes. It depends on where I want to go. And there's also consideration that we might want to deploy destroyers, but the current destroyers don't really have an anti-ship capability. And that's not why we're doing that. I also realized I didn't send over electronic warfare vessels to the checkpoint, which means they have no actual way to lock on missiles. Because there are commercial stations, they don't they can put an active sensor on, but it's a very weak active sensor, and the fighters don't have their own active sensors. Just because I made a decision to not have an active sensor to save on weight or mass, and volume. And that's because fighters are very strapped for that. Very, very strapped for that. We also finished up Ground Force Construction Rate 400, which is awesome. And I start research on the next thing I want, which is going to be boarding bays. And that will allow us to really build out the potential Marine Corps that I want for the future for capturing enemy ships. We're also building a lot of SIM-4Bs. And that's probably going to be the last long run of missiles we do before we get to Ion era missiles. And then we'll start churning those ones out. We're also going to build some of the new, or retooling for the new 100,000-ton colony ships with 250,000 people per ship. Those ships are going to be really invaluable for getting colonists, especially to places where it's very low colony cost, like Terra Nova, which has a very low colony cost. It's going to be really, really, really important and impactful there. And we start setting up our ground forces, specifically what we're going to have in them to make them work. So I decide that for a planetary defense force, we're going to have the defense commands with enough logistics for 25,000 tons of ground forces, and then the remaining 20,000 tons are going to be the surface to orbit weapons. So we're going to have those surface to orbit weapons providing the remainder, and they will then be deployed as 50,000 ton blocks to the colony. So one for New Eden, one for Nelson, one for Horatio, and one for Terra Nova. And then we're going to, every time we colonize on the planet, we're going to forward deploy those troops. And those troops will ensure defense both on the ground and also with their orbital defense weapons, right? So the reason I'm giving them some infantry is that they will be able to provide defense against minimal attacks. And we'll also be able to soak damage if the surface weapons do get attacked, right? Because we want something to be protected. It's also just a bit of RP, right? We send a planetary defense garrison, they can hold the area, and that means that the army, which we actually have, we can change out, we can have them do their own thing, and we don't have to worry too much about what they're doing. Where they don't have to garrison every bloody thing. And yeah, our drive coming along, it'll be done September of 1992. Which I'm very excited for. The Som Cadiz and Lake Erie finish off their overhauls. And we actually have a lot of capacity here on Terra Nova, primarily towards Horatio. And a lot of these colonies that we're moving maintenance facilities over to. Though I do realize we have a bit of a hole, so I start moving our maintenance supplies to one of the other colonies. Again, it's a never-ending battle with logistics. Maintenance logistics, fuel logistics, ordnance logistics. And when we're playing a missile fleet, that ordnance logistics is then additional on top of everything else. And then there's also the overhauling, some patrolling back and forth, and cycling out basically when you quote rotas between fleet deployments, and all this other stuff, right? And eventually I want to get to the point where we have carrier groups patrolling areas, right? So when we have enemy ships, such as the MPRs, right? When we have a big enemy fleet and we have a border area, I want those carrier groups patrolling that border area and patrolling our space to make sure that we have quick response no matter where we are in system, and that we can be very clear that we are in control here, and if you attempt to come through, we will deal with you using our carriers. And Earth has got the Aegean Block 2s ready to go, and we're refitting now some of the Aegeans to the Block 2 variant with the missile tubes on them, and we'll load those up with the new missiles. Now, the current size 8 missiles are kind of worse. They're just worse S4s because they're double the size, but capable of the same capability, really. But they will become in a lot more handy once we have better technology, and those size 8 missiles will allow much bigger warheads. And that is the great thing about missile technology and missile doctrine, is that yes, current missiles may not be great, but we can always upgrade old ships with new missiles and make them pretty capable vessels. So even though we have slow ships, or the ships may be out of date or obsolete, if you load them up with some new missiles, some next generation capability, they can actually be pretty damn good, because the missile upgrades and the tubes stay the same, no matter what. And here we are setting up, I think, a fuel transport to, I think it's Terra Nova, if I remember correctly. We're going to start transferring fuel to Terra Nova. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to consider, okay, do we start harvesting from Proxima itself? And I think, yes, we will, but right now we can't. And so I order one of our long-haul fuel transports, which are one of our big fuel transports, to begin moving over fuel to Terra Nova Prime at a regular interval, right? For now, we're just going to transport the 12 million liters of fuel immediately, but then we will adjust that as needed. We will adjust that as needed once the ship's back at port. And we're setting up a planetary defense commands here. We're going to build new infantry battalions, of course, for all of this. And I'm also adding in an artillery battalion that will provide us with some bombardment capability and a little bit of support. You know, just diversify things, make it interesting. And I noticed our checkpoint's having some issues, and the reason for this is because I didn't set up a deep space population, which I needed to do so that the actual maintenance is counted correctly. So we have the checkpoint over here, and I'm like, okay, what the hell's going on? So I have to get the tug out there, we have to go over, we have to check it out, and we have to sort it. There's so much that goes into Aurora, and there's so much in the logistics field, that if you're as insane as I am, you will really enjoy everything, right? You will really enjoy all this, which I do. But if not, it can be quite tedious and boring setting up the logistics for everything. And here we go, we're going a deep space population. But those logistics are really what keeps the Empire running. It's what we're here to play. It's, you know, how does an empire explore, expand, and exploit and exterminate? Well, it does it through logistics. The game is 95% logistics and 5% combat. And logistics from minerals to refueling to everything. It's just so important. And we've got to always keep that in mind. So here we are, setting it up. Setting up the checkpoint. And so what this means is that it thinks it's a population, and you got the maintenance facilities on the population, and so it works as intended there. The checkpoint 1A. We can also see it now on this screen, which is actually really nice that we see the checkpoints, and we know exactly what is there or is not there. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Please like, comment, subscribe, and goodbye.